Let's turn our attention now to text and textual histories. Um, in the Renaissance, we first get to a print culture, and the way that plays come down to us historically is very interesting and very complicated. Of course, plays were originally written out by hand, manuscripts, but not many manuscripts of plays from this time period are still extant. That's not particularly surprising. They were closely held by theater companies, but because the theater was forcibly ended in 1642 when the Commonwealth started, a lot of these manuscripts were destroyed or lost. We have no manuscripts by Shakespeare, possibly just a couple of speeches in a play by somebody else, but that he might have contributed to. But all of his handwritten manuscripts are gone, as are those of most playwrights of the period, though there are a couple of exceptions, so we do have some idea of what manuscripts would have looked like on paper in this period. But Shakespeare's plays in particular are known to us only because they went into print. And interestingly, when they first went into print, they often went into print without his permission. In a form called a quarto. A quarto is a size designation. It's about the size of a modern-day paperback, and it was treated about with the intellectual respect of a modern-day paperback, too. A lot of these plays seem to have been stolen, as it were, one way or another, got to a printer in a not very official or complete form. These used to be called bad quartos, but there's a lot of interesting information to be gleaned from them, and we now think of them primarily as short quartos. This, on the screen here, you can see a picture of the first quarto of Hamlet, one that looks very different if you look just at the lines on this page. Looks very different than the longer versions of Hamlet that we know. It's about half the length of the second quarto. It also has characters that have completely different names and contains at least one completely different scene. And the scenes are also in a different order than they are in the second quarto. These short quartos, therefore, it seems clear to us, are not accurate records of what the playwright wrote, but they may tell us some interesting things about how the plays made it to the stage, what they were like when they were performed, and so we still pay a lot of attention to them. But as far as the literature goes, we're really thinking much more about the long quartos. These are the versions that seem to be authorized by Shakespeare. In some cases, they seem to have been authorized particularly to salvage his literary reputation because the short quartos didn't do a very good job of representing him. So lots of times he allowed a printer to go into print with a much better, fuller version of his play, something much closer to what he personally wrote. Though these also, despite the fact that it says there on the cover it's a true and perfect copy, are not true and perfect copies. They often have lots of problems with them that have to be considered, and we'll do some of that when we're thinking about our Shakespeare editorial project. In fact, we'll be thinking about all three versions of Hamlet, the first quarto, the second quarto, and the folio. The folio, unlike these quartos, which were one-play editions, is a complete collection of all of Shakespeare's works. It was put together by two of his company mates, fellow actors, Hemmings and Condell, and it was put together after he died. Only 18 of his plays went into print during his lifetime in those quarto versions, so another 18 plays would be completely lost to us, except that they were salvaged after he died in copies that appear here in the folio. some surprisingly prominent ones, like, say, Macbeth, we only know because it appears here in the folio. A folio was a much larger book. It's about the size of the campus newspaper, the, the Express. Almost double the size of a quarto, therefore, and it's a much thicker book because it contains 36 plays instead of just one play, and a number of other prefatory matters and things that extend its length out. Short of the King James Bible, it's probably the most important book printed during the English Renaissance. A copy of it is extraordinarily valuable. There are a couple hundred known copies in the world, but they're still very rare, very difficult to find. But astonishingly, one of those copies sits in the San Francisco State Library. You have to go to the rare book room and you have to get special permission to see it. But we own one of these very rare, extraordinary copies. So when we're thinking about plays of this period, we're thinking about, do we have a manuscript? If not, did it go into print, and do we know it from a short quarto, which probably indicates that it's not a perfect record of what was going on in the play. It's probably a pretty damaged record. We might also know it through a longer quarto or through publication in a folio, in which case we have much more reliable but not necessarily perfect copies. We'll want to think about more some of the complications that come to us from these imperfect copies of plays.